Hello, my name is Chris Sayers. I am a senior visual effects artist at Blizzard, and today I want to do a talk about how to get a job in games on a low budget. I'm mostly going to be talking about my kind of experience and how I got a job in games, and hopefully, some of this will be relevant to someone, and maybe even useful. Um, so yeah, without further ado, I'll just get cracking. So today, like I said, I'm gonna just briefly talk about myself, um, because of the fact that I want to give it some context about why I feel like I have something to say about this topic, my experience in doing that, and then how you can kind of use that learning to make a plan for yourself. What you need, and need being the stressor in that sentence. Like I said, my personal experience, what I went through, what I needed to do it, and then a little bit on the end about networking in general, um, because I think that is an important part of it, and it kind of doesn't really get taught. And as always, full disclaimer, this is just my opinion. Um, there is no truth. There's no one truth to anything about getting into games or anything to do with games, really. Um, they're just opinions. I'd always recommend that if you are interested in these kinds of things, to try and go to as many different events as you can, or watch as many talks as you can, and listen to as many different opinions as you can. And one of them might resonate with you, and one of them might be the thing that you think, actually, you know what, this feels the most appropriate for me in my context and my situation. So, as always, these are just opinions. There's no guaranteed route. There are no guarantees, basically, about anything, and you should just try and collect as many resources as you can, and then make your decision from there about what you think is best for you. Um, so yeah, starting with introductions. Like I said, my name is Chris Sayers. I'm originally from Southwest Wales. I grew up on a farm on a mountainside in the countryside with where still has dial-up internet today, no broadband, and so I wasn't really very much aware of kind of the online things. Like I was on online, but not very well, very slowly. Um, and so I didn't know anything about game development. I didn't know anything about game development skills. I played games like since I was born, basically, but I didn't really think anything of them and how they were made. It just didn't really occur to me. So I originally trained as an actor. All the way through school, I did acting and music and English literature and psychology and sociology. And then when I went to university in Bristol, I did my bachelor's in drama and acting. Um, as you can see, that didn't necessarily go anywhere. Well, I graduated in 2017, and I needed a job, as most people do, because I had to pay rent. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to do something that was kind of like part time or anything like that. I thought, well, the best thing I can do is just get a job and then figure it out from there. So I got a job as a technical recruiter in Reading, and I worked in recruitment for about 6 months there, and then I was headhunted by a gaming recruitment company to work for them, and then I was an exclusive gaming recruiter. So I recruited people into studios across the world, and tried to find. I worked mostly on programming roles, but as part of doing it, I learned about VFX because a client wanted me to find them a VFX artist. Um, and so what I did was I went to the London VFX Festival and to try and discover what VFX really was, so I could recruit for it. And there was a talk there by David Rolfe, who was a VFX artist at Creative Assembly at the time, and he did this talk all about what VFX was and how it functioned in games. I thought it was mesmerizing. I'd never heard of it or didn't know anything about it, and he said if anyone's considering a career in games, to become a VFX artist, because there were loads of jobs and it paid pretty well. So I figured, well, it might work. I might have a guaranteed job out of it. So from 2018, I started to look into it whilst I was still working as a recruiter. And then one day, I had a bit of a breakdown at work and just quit on the spot and figured I have enough money to last me about 6 or 7 months, just living off my savings. I'm going to teach myself to become a VFX artist and hope for the best. Um, I did, and in November I got got two offers on the same day. One of them was for a QA tester job at Future Lab, which was a contract role, and then I also got the junior VFX artist position at Mediatonic on the same day. But I'd already accepted the QA job, and I felt bad, and I didn't want to upset anyone, so I said, "Can I do the QA contract and then do the junior VFX artist job afterwards?" And thankfully, they said yes. So I did my QA test job at Future Lab, which I really enjoyed, and I learned a lot about QA and the value of QA and how it functions. And I got to learn a lot about all the different disciplines as well by being in QA, because I kind of had to speak to everybody. And then in March of 2019, I joined as a junior VFX artist, working on the critically acclaimed Temple Run puzzle adventure, which was my first game that I worked on as a VFX artist. I worked on that for about 18 months, and then I was promoted to mid-level and moved on to an unannounced game, still at Mediatonic. And then I worked on that for about 18 months, and then I changed projects to work on Fall Guys. I worked on that for about 5 months, and then in November of last year, 2022, I started at Blizzard as a senior VFX artist on Overwatch 2, which has been really, really fun. I'm really enjoying it. Which brings us to now. So the part that obviously we want to talk about is this era here, the self-taught VFX over 7 months from May to November, because how exactly did I go about doing that? Because that kind of doesn't really encapsulate everything that I really did. So I want to go a bit into how exactly, like factually, pragmatically, on a day-to-day, how I actually achieved doing that myself in my experience, and then maybe about the way that we could figure out you doing this for your own path and your own goal. So talking of goals, this is the kind of situation which I think most people will find themselves in, and I think this is important to do quite early on in the process and understanding where you want to go and how you want to achieve it. So you've got your current situation, which is obviously wherever you are in your life right now. And then at the end of that, you have the goal. Whatever that goal may be, it is ideally we will find out a goal first, because that's got to be something that we know. But in between those two things is the problem. It's the I don't know how to get from here to there, or there are some unknowns between there. But we need to know the goal and then work backwards from there. So for me, my goal, like I said, working backwards from there, my goal was quite simple, really. I wanted a job as a VFX artist. I wanted to become a professional VFX artist, and that was it. And I don't know, the way that I am as a person, just kind of once I put my mind to something, I'm like, it's not even like a choice. It's not a decision. I'm like, it is what I will do, and it will happen. So that was my goal, and then I decided on it. Now, for my current situation, I was just a baby with no idea of how to do that. I didn't know what a VFX artist really did, like day to day. I didn't know their skills. I didn't know what software they use. I didn't know any VFX artists myself. I had no connections, no network in how to actually become that. No knowledge, no portfolio, no previous art skills, nothing at all. But I wanted to become a VFX artist. So I was thinking, from where I am now and where I want to be, obviously a full-time VFX artist, like I said, degree in drama and acting, so I was not exactly qualified for a VFX artist job. So I thought, okay, well, how do I bridge that gap from where I am to where I want to be? Like, I know for myself, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to become a VFX artist. I will make it happen. It will happen. It just will. So the solution to that problem is to learn all of those things. I need to learn the skills. So 2D painting, 3D modeling, animation, tech art, shaders. I need to know the skills. I need to build a network of some kind. And I also need to get some knowledge about the job and where those jobs exist. So where jobs are, where I'm likely to be hired, how I'm likely to be hired. And then basically you have your task. Your solution is everything that you just need to do to bridge that gap. So for me, I was like, okay, those are all the things I need to learn, and that's how I'm going to do it. So in terms of what I actually personally did myself, what did I need? Obviously, this is a talk that's about budgets and doing it on a low budget. So this here on the left, the equipment, is the only thing that had a factual cost, bar rent and staying alive and things like that. These are the exact specs of the PC that I used to learn VFX. So for full transparency, this was 5 years ago, and I had bought the PC 2 years prior, I think, whilst I was still working. So I was earning money. So I felt comfortable to buy a PC at the time because I could afford it at the time. And I made sure that I had the resources that I needed whilst I was working and whilst I was comfortable so that it wasn't, dipping into my savings. And my savings were not much, let me tell you that. But like I said, even at the time, it was an out-of-date machine. It was a GTX 970, which you can buy now for like £90, £100. I just put like approximate prices on there at the moment. I looked at them on like eBay, and that's what they're going for now. So, for disclosure of what it cost me, I bought my PC for £650 at the time. Now you can get all of those things for around about £400 to £500, but even at the time, I didn't necessarily need that exact equipment, because you can get worse machines that still run the software, still do the things you need to do. But like I had a monitor, the minimum amount of RAM that I could to run the programs, a processor, a graphics card, mouse, keyboard, etc. And then I put on here a Wacom Intuos S. My partner, they also learned to become a UI artist, and this was the tablet that they used, and they used this for like well over a year whilst they were teaching themselves graphic design and UI art. But this isn't optional. I didn't even touch a tablet until I got my first job at Mediatonic, and then they asked me what tablet I wanted, and I just was like, I don't know, a nice one, because I'd never used one. I'd used my mouse for all of my texture painting up until that time. Um, so talking about like texture painting in terms of software, do not pay any money for any software if you don't want to, because you don't have to. We're luckily heading into a kind of era where people are finally taking Blender as an example seriously, and you can legitimately use your Blender skills to get a job at professional studios. Because there's been some controversy over time, being like, well, you know what, it doesn't matter because the industry standard is still Maya or 3ds Max, but the skill about using these software is what you're building. The actual mechanical skill of using the physical software is kind of inconsequential because you can always just relearn in a different tool as long as you have that foundational understanding. So if you learn in Blender, you can move over to Maya or Max or whatever kind of software they use. Similarly for 2D, like Krita. Krita is basically Photoshop, but free. It's just all the different knobs and buttons and UIs in different places. So do not pay for anything that you do not have to. I did not pay for anything at all. I used only free software. I used Unreal at the time just because it was what I was aware of. And I found it more approachable than Unity when I first started. I think the documentation for like newbies is a bit more friendly, so I preferred Unreal at the time. But yeah, in terms of actual resource, like equipment-based resources, that is the upfront cost you would have to put in. If you have existing a PC already, you might be able to use all the software. You might not need to upgrade anything. Maybe you just need to upgrade your RAM or something like that. But to bear in mind that if you do need to buy a PC and do need to buy equipment, you don't have to buy something that's new in 2023. You can buy something, whatever is the minimum possible requirement to physically run the software. So if you go on the Unreal website and it sees that, Unreal Engine 5 needs da 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 to be able to run, well, then don't look at Unreal Engine 5. Look at the oldest version you can still get of Unreal Engine 4, because that will have more forgiving requirements. And like I said, with learning software, as long as you can learn in Unreal Engine 4, even that's from like 3, 4, 5 years ago, all it is just passing that knowledge into a new user interface once you get into the newer software. So it's still just as valid. Like, I learnt completely in Unreal, and then I got my first job, and then I turned up on the day and they were like, oh, we use Unity. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just had to kind of learn how to use Unity. And thankfully, although everything looks different and kind of behaves in a different way, the theories are all still the same. So I had to just reframe it all and go, okay, well, where is this button I would expect in Unreal, but in Unity now? So just learn the actual foundations and then go from there. Once you have that software and hardware and everything to physically do the thing, though, resources. So I've listed some resources here just as an example, but every single resource I used personally was free. I didn't pay for anything. Now, there are some fantastic paid courses. Like at some point I have mentioned VFX Apprentice, which is on here, which is specific for VFX, but I think it's a fantastic resource, and I think that the teaching on there is industry standard. Like I know a lot of people who've done those courses and then gone on to get jobs, so it is really good. I personally, I just can't, forcibly recommend it because it does have an incurred upfront cost, and it can be done with completely free resources like YouTube tutorials. I probably did like 500 YouTube tutorials over those 7 months. Gumroad has free assets. If you go on Gumroad and then search by price and then just put 0 in both the max and the min, it will show you free resources. Lots of them will have a pay what you think it's worth. You can pay $0. I know that's a bit cheeky, but when you're a student and when you're a learner, you have to do what you have to do to be able to learn these things. And I'm sure there's an element of understanding there that you're not some big studio paying $0 for this resource. But there are loads of examples like realtimevfx.com. That's a forum specifically for VFX artists to learn and train and share advice. There's also a Discord. There are loads of Discords and communities in general. Pinterest is a pretty good, weird one. You can find tutorials on there just because it's an aggregate of just, scoured internet stuff. And then other people's portfolios are going to be a really, really great resource for you because you can look at kind of what's the standard and what you're going to be expected to know how to do because you've already looked at and gone, okay, well, this person has X, Y, Z and they just got hired. Ergo, I need to know how to do X, Y, Z. And finally, Unreal Marketplace assets as an example. I used loads of the Paragon assets that Unreal released for free, downloaded them all, and then just ripped them apart. And then for a start, you can use the animations to actually put VFX over, so it's good for demoing VFX or environments or whatever you want to do. But also there's quite a lot of on there that you can then go through and look through the textures and look through the UVs and look through the materials and the shaders and go, oh wow, they built it like this, and learn by deconstructing someone else's work. There's a lot of value in doing that, I think. Just a quick disclaimer, other people's portfolios are only used for benchmarking and study. You can't just, trace someone's artwork and be like, I've learned, that's my portfolio piece. Like, tracing is fine to learn, but it's not a portfolio piece. It's got to be for study. And yeah, so talking about resources and then going on to the structure. So for me, I am a creature of habit, and structure helps me do things very consistently. I have the same habits like every single day. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing, and it helps me maintain a really rigorous structure in that way. So when I did this and when I was teaching myself VFX, I treated it like it was a full-time job. So it wasn't kind of pottering about and doing stuff like and here and there. I knew all the resources that I wanted to do. I'd ordered them in the actual chronological order that I wanted to complete them by, because I kind of looked through them all, was like, this one looks kind of like a beginner's one. I think I could tackle that. This is a bit intermediate. I think I'll leave that until later down the line. This is super advanced. I'd love to understand it, but maybe in a couple of weeks once I understand some more. And then every day it was structured like I was at a job. So in the morning, I would do my job search for about an hour. I had a bookmark like folder on my Chrome where I would just right click, open all bookmarks, and it was every single game company in the UK's careers page. So every morning for an hour, I would click on every single one, click, scroll through, no updates, no VFX jobs, close. Next one. All, I don't know, 200, 300, whatever was in there every single morning. And then I would go, cool, there are no more jobs. Or if there was a job, I'd then bookmark it, click at it, and then save it for later in the day, because I'd be like, right, it's too early in the morning, I'm not going to apply to it right now, my brain's not fully functioned, but I've started to wake up in the day. Now, what am I going to actually focus on today? Here's the tutorial. What do I need? I need a mesh. I need this program and this program. Cool. Framing it in my mind, time to get started, start working through these tutorials. And then break time, lunch, go outside, have a walk, see the sun, take some fresh air, come back, 2 p.m., start working again. Sometimes I'd switch it up and I would start working on the tutorials again, or maybe I would then go back to those jobs that I'd bookmarked in the morning and then actually apply to them, write my cover letters, tweak my CV, stuff like that, make duplicate CVs depending on what the jobs were for, continue all the way until like 6 p.m. and then clock off for the day. And then I was like, cool, I've done for the day. That's my learning. And then my evenings is my own. I can do whatever the hell I want because, I've clocked out of work and I'm treating it like this very rigid and military organization of structure, and then the next day it's the same thing. Now obviously, like, there are a lot of pros and cons in that, because like I said, this was my life every single day for about 6.5, 7 months, um, which is not for everyone. It was very intense. And I was running out of money constantly, and I had to make it work, or I would be homeless at the end of the time. So every day I was like, well, there we go. I've just got to keep going, keep going. It was a lot. It was very intense. Um, so, like I said, just as a quick recap of everything I've said there, I worked for a full-time job for just over a year and had my stable and regular income, and then in my part-time, when I started to learn about what VFX was, I just started bookmarking stuff. I didn't start learning. I just started to find the resources. Um, in my situation, I was working in an industry, like my role adjacent role, because it was in the industry, but it just wasn't a dev role. It was in recruitment, um, which I found a lot of value in afterwards because it meant I learned how to write people's CVs, cover letters. I learned a lot about the industry as a whole, like where companies were and how big companies functioned and small companies functioned, and where I was likely to be hired as a result of that. So there was a lot of knowledge that I got from that kind of adjacent role. Um, but that just goes, for example, as a recruitment. That doesn't have to be that. Like, you could work. Like, I always recommend getting a full-time job and working something stable because it's regular and you're not worrying about when your hours are going to be, or when you'll have days off, or when you'll have holidays, because you know them when they'll be, because it's an office job or an admin job or something very, very stable and regimented. It allows you to kind of build what you want to do afterwards and around that without having to worry about, oh no, sorry, today is an unknown because I don't really know what I'm going to be working on, or something like that. But there was a lot of value for me in having that stable role. And like I said, I discovered VFX through my job as a result of it, and was able to start compiling all those resources. So when I did eventually quit my job, I had everything like ready to go. I was ready to pull the trigger on everything. Um, so I did that for about 7 months, applied for hundreds of jobs, at least. And got many, many rejections, many, many, many ignores. I ran out of money very, very briefly. I fully, completely ran out of money. I got to the final end of my savings, and I had to start temping. I joined a temping agency in London, and I worked for some like random, like as a receptionist for like 2 days, or a call center for 3 days, and something like that. Just whilst I was building up some money again, and then I was in the situation where I was like, okay, what I might do is get another full-time job again, do the same thing for a year, and then do the same thing again, quit my job, do that. And then luckily, I didn't have to do that because I did get a job right at the end as I was running out of money, and I started temping. So full caveat on my experience and all the things that surrounded it. Like I said, I worked a full-time job for, I said 9 months, but it was about a year, saving all the money I could. And I saved around about £3,500. Like whilst I was working. So I was renting in London, and I shared a house with 4 other people. So I knew what my rent was going to be, which was still not cheap, but I was making it as cheap as I possibly could by sharing with lots of other people. I knew how many, like, my rent was around about like £600 a month or something like that. So I was like, well, I can survive around about 6 and a bit months with £3,500, assuming I spend no money on anything, which I did. I walked everywhere. I didn't go anywhere. Literally weekends, I would just stay in the house. I didn't spend any money. I ate as little as possible, which I'm not saying is a good thing, but I just tried to eat. I did every like Sunday. I'd buy like a huge batch of like food and then bulk cook all of my meals for the entire week, and then just freeze and then defrost and eat all my meals like that, so that I could then make the like try and get the minimum amount of expenditure on just food. Like I cancelled my phone, I cancelled any subscription things. I saved as much money as I physically could do, only on the essentials, which I was mentioning earlier about like what I needed. I absolutely tried to get it down to the bare minimum in terms of need, because in my circumstances I didn't have a choice. And when I said, like, when I set my mind to something, it's like, oh, I don't have a choice. This is what I'm doing. Like, for a number of reasons. Like, at the end of the day, if I didn't succeed in doing this, I was going to be homeless. I was going to run out of money to be able to pay the rent. I didn't have anywhere to go. For one reason or another, I'm kind of cut off from my family. So it wasn't like I was like, well, I'll just go and live with someone else. I was like, I have to make this work. Which is why I mentioned here briefly about the concept of the fear. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do anything in your life out of fear, but I do think it can be a little bit of a good motivator sometimes in this element of, no, I have to make this work. Because I saw something on TikTok the other day that was like someone who is, I don't know, half as intelligent as you is earning 4 times the money you do because they don't have the fear that it's going to go wrong. Which, I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but this idea that your fear is what's holding you back. Like, I think sometimes it can be a valid thing to push you, because I think it's something that's like, well, it is scary and this is gonna happen, but if I work really hard, I can push for it because that's my motivation. I don't know, say what you will about that, but it worked for me in that instance because it was something that I had to make work, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make it work. Um, and yeah, like I said, I shared with 4 people. I also shared with my partner, but I was fully responsible for my own rent and my own finances. And I mean, they were working a internship, earning £500 a month at the time, so it wasn't like we were rolling in dough. Um, Taking breaks every day is something that's super important. I didn't do this like enough looking back. Like, I did take a break every single day and go outside and go for a walk and try and maintain some physical and mental health. But like I said, I was in an incredibly low budget with a fixed amount of time, and there was a pressure to make it work because I had to make it work. So I definitely did burn out a little bit as a result of me learning VFX. Um, which I now know. And like I said, I would then, like, why I'm suggesting you take breaks and make sure you do it in a healthy way. But yeah, it's really important to keep yourself healthy in both mental and physical sense so that you're actually able to kind of tackle it in a good way. And also start as you mean to go on. Like, you want to be setting a good precedent for yourself and the way that you work and what you're capable of doing, even while you're learning, so that when you go to doing it, you've already established those boundaries with work. Um, and like I mentioned earlier, I bought my hardware before quitting. It was about £650 at the time. It was already outdated at the time, but it was just enough for me to be able to run the stuff, play games, and it was enough for me to be able to play with any of the software that I wanted to play with. Um, this is a kind of way of looking at these things in terms of understanding whether or not this is the right route for you. Both a pro and a con is that was my life every single day for 6 months. I had a lot of structure, which was good for me because it helped me to stay focused. But also it was incredibly monotonous. And I was like kind of low-key depressed by about month 4 or 5 because I was just in the same room in my bedroom on my PC every single day doing YouTube tutorials, hoping that one day this would pay off and that I wouldn't run out of money. So, you know, it's important to make a kind of judgment for yourself if you think that's something that you're going to be able to deal with. Like, I mean, at hindsight, I had an absolutely fantastic experience in trialing how well I was going to deal with the pandemic, because staying at home, through the lockdowns, I'd already done that shit. So I was like, I've got this down. But it's something that you got to decide for yourself. Like I mentioned here as well, you can dedicate as much time as possible because you're treating this like a full-time job, rather than in the alternate way is, maintaining a job and then working in your free time, which can be really, really, really laborious in terms of draining from your physical energy when you're trying to work a full-time job and then also learn another job in your spare time. That's a lot. So in this way, you can dedicate as much time as you want, because it's your whole life. But that's also quite overwhelming because there's a lot to learn or a lot to do, and it's difficult to know where to start. And going from that, how much effort you put in is going to result in the output that you get, because no matter, you're the only one that's responsible for yourself. But similarly, you could find it very difficult if you are not good at self-studying or self-motivating, in the same reason that some people thrive in university because they want university lecturers and the guidance. Some people would hate that environment because they want to completely learn by themselves, and both of those are valid and equally important, but you've got to decide for yourself whether or not you think that's going to be something that you can deal with and thrive in. So yeah, self-teaching means you can learn whatever you want, but it's also just you, and burnout is not a joke. It can really, really make you feel like shit for a long time. So you've got to do these things in a way which are going to be helpful for you. And that's something that I would take away from how I did it, is that I had no network, no connections, no community, no support other than from like my partner and my housemates. And it was a lot. Like, I was lonely and it was tiring. And I would encourage you to, if you were going to do something like this, something that's very intensive and learning an entire new career, to do it in a way that's manageable and sustainable for yourself. Because obviously, in my instance, it did work out and it did pay off, but it was exhausting and it was a lot. So you've got to decide whether or not you think that's something you can maintain. So, briefly talking about networking, there are three kind of routes, really, in my opinion, that you can do networking. You've got the traditional sense of networking, which is events-based stuff, like going to develop and getting a free expo ticket, or EGX Res, or WASD, or WASD, whatever you want to call it, or going to Intergames charity events and stuff like that, or any kind of games events. We physically go and talk to people, walk up to strangers and try and get them to help you, and then feel really embarrassed and scared the whole time. That's like traditional networking. That's fine, and that works for a lot of people and a lot of reasons, but it's also incredibly scary. And it's not what I did primarily when I was building like my networking games. I did most of mine through 1 and 3 online and communities. I have another talk which has a section in it called Networking for Introverts, which is kind of like a shortened version of that. I will post a link to the other talk as well. But I basically want to talk about these 3 avenues of networking and building a network, and how they can be beneficial for you and how they can help support getting a job in games. They're not a guarantee, they're just there to support that. So first of all, online networking, I'm going to start with an example of LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn can be a cesspool of clickbaity, I rise and grind, wake up at 5 a.m., I'm really cool, this is the only way to succeed kind of thing. Or it can just be like a totally normal place where you have unfettered access to professional people all over the world, some of which who are very nice and will reply to you. And that's essentially all of that this relies on. So the way that I used LinkedIn is that I was fortunate is that because I'd already been a recruiter, I had spent a long time already cultivating a network because I was trying to hire them, that it meant that I was already very comfortable on the platform. But when I actually started to learn for myself, this was what I did, and this was a new type of networking I'd never done before. So, like I mentioned earlier about having this goal, and you and your current situation, and then the problem that's stopping you, this is an example of how you can use LinkedIn to kind of alleviate one of those things, or get get a start on where you're going to go with something. So, for example, say you're using an associate producer role as an example. Intergames have this fantastic thing on their website where you can go to and look all the jobs in games, and they'll kind of tell you, what a day in the job looks like of that things, what kind of skills they have. So maybe you've gone through there, you don't really know what you want to do in games, but you found associate producer, you've read the description, and you go, actually, that seems pretty sick. That seems pretty fun. I think I'd want to do that. I think that, works well with my skills and my strengths as a person, but I don't know how to actually get that job. This is something that you can do to solve that issue. So I'm looking for my first job as an associate producer. The problem is I don't know how to be qualified for that job. Well, how do you solve that? Well, who would be qualified for that job is someone that already has that job. So I need to find someone who can tell me what qualifications or skills I need to be able to get that job. Therefore, I need to find someone who has those skills and has that job. So I'll search for someone who is an associate producer, ideally straight out of university, so their experience is applicable to my own, and someone who is an associate producer 10 years ago is less relevant. So you're honing in on a very specific type of person, which LinkedIn will allow you to search for people who work as an associate producer, have been in their role for less than X amount of time, did or didn't have a university degree, are an associate producer right now, and then you can click through profiles and go, oh, they've been an associate producer for 4 years. I'll put them on the list, but I won't put them as a priority because 4 years ago, the landscape of games was very different. So I'll try and find people who've been hired recently, within the last 6 months to a year, that kind of thing. Because those people are the ones who have been literally in the process and in the pipeline very recently, and they're likely to have an experience which is going to reflect the reality of the situation more so. So if you find people that have those skills, have that experience that you're looking for, all you need to do now is just message them. So whilst they can be scary, these are some examples of kinds of things that you could say, or the things that I did say when I was reaching out to people, and the different approaches that they have and the ways that they work in terms of asking for help for people. Because obviously something that you need is then people to be willing to give you that help in return. Um, and people don't have to give you help, and that's totally their prerogative. And you would never blame anyone for not wanting to, because it's a lot of effort and it's a lot of input. So there are ways that you can do it which allow people the choice, and that choice to say no, I'm not interested. So in these examples, like, hi Sarah, I'm currently expanding my games network. I wanted to send an invite to you, as I noticed we're both 3D artists. All the best, Dan. Dan is very polite in this situation. In this instance, you've got something which is very clear, and an agenda is very clearly set from the get-go of like contacting this person, because obviously these people are strangers. They don't know you. You might have no mutuals. You might have no existing connections to them, existing network. You might have literally zero connections, so your credibility is very low. You could be spam. You could be trying to sell them something. If you add a message and make it very clear what your agenda is from the get-go, LinkedIn has statistics on this, but you're so much more likely to actually get someone to respond to you and say yes and actually then talk to you if you include a message which explains really specifically what your agenda is. Because in that instance, it doesn't demand anything from Sarah. Sarah is just going, I want to, oh sure, they're a 3D artist, accept. Or they can say no, and that's totally fine. In this another example, I'm currently looking for my first role. I love your work in ArtStation. I was wondering if I could ask for a portfolio review. Now, I'm not saying that you should just say this for flattery's sake. This is something that has to be true. You have to actually value and care about their opinion. If you have seen someone's ArtStation and you go, oh my God, their work is beautiful, I don't know how to do that, find them on LinkedIn, send them a message and ask them. Now, they can totally say no, absolutely. But if they say yes, you've now got an industry professional who knows that you have been specific in who you're targeting because you've asked them specifically. You've seen their work on ArtStation. You've set your agenda, which is very clear. So they're not going to be surprised when you suddenly message them and then go, hey, could I ask for a portfolio review? You're like, oh, no, I don't want to do this. I'm now just going to delete you. You've made that agenda very clear, and it allows someone to say, yeah, okay, why not? I'll help this person, or no. It's much less aggressive and it demands less from a person if you can set those expectations quite clear. Another example, I saw you posted about a junior concept art position. I wanted to ask a few questions about the role. Now, in this instance, this might be the hiring manager for that job, and they may be posting because they're trying to hire onto their team. Now, the job posting may say, must have a Bachelor of Arts in games art role or concept art role or something or other. And then you ask them, hey, I don't have a degree. Do you still recommend applying? And they might say, I have never even asked for the person to have a degree. That's just something recruitment put on there. Sure, I don't care. In which case, you've immediately now learned something specific. Or they may say, how about you send me your portfolio, and then I'll just let you know, right here and now, if I think that you could. Now, those aren't guarantees at all, but they're always options and they're opportunities. And even if that person goes, oh no, actually no, you do straight up have to have a degree for whatever reason, I don't know, then so be it. Thank you very much for your time. All the best. You've now made a connection. Something. It's always something, because the next junior concept art position they post about, they might not ask for a degree, and then you've already said, hey, we spoke last time. You recommended apply, but I don't have a degree. This one doesn't need it. Should I apply? Absolutely. Go ahead. Because these people are just people online. Like, they're not anyone special. And honestly, if anyone does behave like they're special online, they were probably never going to help you in the first place. So if anyone behaves like that or is rude or whatever, then you can just bye. I mean, you were never going to help me, so I don't even need to give you any thinking about this. As long as you're polite and respectful and humble and, courteous and ask genuinely and don't demand anything from people, most people will generally help you because they want to help. But people who were never going to help you, then it doesn't matter what they think, so bye. This is an example that I used at LinkedIn about 5 years ago when I first started. This was the very first effect I'd ever made, and I posted it on LinkedIn. And I just said, I worked on this effect. Feedback would be greatly appreciated, or really appreciated. And just by the nature of the algorithm, or however it works, I ended up with like 20 VFX artists posting and replying to me, giving me advice and saying things that were good and things that were bad and things that needed work and areas that were interesting. And, that was instrumental in me getting a better understanding of how to improve my work. And it was complete strangers I'd never spoken to. I just connected with them and was like, hey, I'm learning VFX and I saw you're a VFX artist. And that was it. And then eventually, on their own volition, they started just commenting on my work and giving me feedback. Um, so yeah, in summary, it's just a tool that you can use, but there's a lot of value in that you can kind of get access to people that are all over the world in a way which is very non-committal and also asynchronous. You're not having to physically be online at the same time, in the same location at the same time, at the same paid event at the same time. You're just sending a message. They can choose to reply or they can choose to not. So it's a very easy way of networking with people. And the worst thing that someone can say to you is no, and most likely they'd probably just ignore you. They wouldn't even say no, they just wouldn't accept your connection. So you've got online networking as an example of a way that you can go about doing it, and then we've also got events-based networking. I'm not going to talk too much on this because events are always tricky because they have issues in the sense that they cost to get to for a start. Even if you have free tickets, like in this example, Develop has a free Expo Pass, which I've only ever got the free Expo Pass, and a lot of developers only get free Expo Passes. They just get the free one, and you just wander around and then go to the events or go to kind of networking events at them. They're all free or in the nearby hotels or restaurants or bars. You don't actually have to pay for the talks if you don't have the money to. Like I said, I've only ever got the free pass. Develop also has something called Meet at Develop, which I've added the link to, where you can actually sign up as a professional to say, hey, I'd be willing to take meetings with people. And then you can go out there and say, I would like to meet with people. And you can scroll through all the lists of people that said, I would like to meet with people, find people that have a job that you're interested in, send them a message, ask to have a meeting. I did this at my first Develop. I ended up meeting with like 5 or 6 people that gave me really great advice. And because they were just professionals working in their jobs, that just wanted to give out their time. And there was a lot of value in doing that. And that was something that was completely free. I even just traveled down to Brighton on the train, did the event, and then immediately went back home again on the same day, so I didn't have to pay for accommodation because it was too expensive. So there are ways that you can do it, which are as cost-free as you can make them. But I don't want to talk too much about meetings just because they're not something that everybody can do. There is value in going to them because you can just meet people. You can just walk up to people's booths and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. I like your company. Do you have any jobs going? This one is EGX London. I included this one because I think it's funny. EGX is great for a lot of reasons. They work with indie games every year now, and they'll usually have like a stand or a booth or a stage that do talks and stuff. They also do portfolio reviewing sessions, and Academy Live, which is the things where they have presentations and speakers come in. This one was funny because I went on the website to get a screenshot, and it was me doing the event there. And I was like, I have to include that now because that's hilarious. Me playing the tiniest violin in the world. But yeah, EGX, both the links are there for EGX. A lot of value in doing that there for various reasons. And also EGX is just a fun event to go to in general if you want to. So yeah, those are the only 2 events I'm going to mention. You can always look online and try and find any game events or game developer events or anything like that. But another way of going about finding those events is by doing something like building a community or joining a community. So communities are something that I didn't have when I was trying to get into games because I wasn't really aware of them at the time. But since being in the industry, I think there is so much value in there because you're essentially rising up in the industry, bringing the people around you with you, and those people will end up being your colleagues and your friends and people that can refer you places, to be honest as well. So joining a community is a really good idea. And when I say a community, I don't mean like a cult. I just mean a group of people who are, have some kind of shared goal or shared interest, and that could be like a Discord community or a forum or anything. But I want to talk a bit about communities and how to find one that I think is good for you, because I think there are a lot of negative communities or people who are negative within communities, I should say. And I think that these are just some good tips of how to find one which is actually constructive for you. So, for example, a clear goal. Like I mentioned all the way through this whole talk, the goal has got to be the most important thing. It's got to be your driving force for everything. So what am I trying to achieve? How could this network help me achieve that? Is this the most appropriate platform? Those are questions you can just ask yourself. Like, for example, if your clear goal is to learn about 3D art, joining a community which is just sharing jobs is probably not going to be that much value for you at the beginning anyway, because of the fact that you don't even have the skills yet to apply for the jobs. A better community would be a 3D art community that's going to be sharing tutorials and resources that can help you learn to do that job. Um, so, things like that, which may seem obvious, but trying to find somewhere which is actually going to help you achieve that goal. Um, and then develop something meaningful as a result of that. So sometimes a smaller network, like you don't necessarily have to join a Discord just because it's got like thousands of people. Like if you think it's got like 50 people and they're all actually going to be really helpful and you like them and they're kind, then I think that's a better community for you. And when I say community, this is why I feel like it's a nicer word than necessarily the kind of networking per se. Is sometimes people feel like they want to get something out of networking and they're not actually willing to put something into networking. Like this has got to be a symbiotic relationship that you are helping people just as much as they help you, because otherwise why would anyone help you? Like you shouldn't just expect or demand it from people just because they are a community that is there to support. This would be something that you're actively engaging in and helping just as much in a reciprocal way. And on that note, avoiding a toxic community, one like that is building each other up together. Like there shouldn't be an element of competition or criticism of each other. There's always the point directly below it is that good feedback shouldn't be harsh. I am a huge, huge, huge believer of that. There are some people who believe that, like, I will break you down and then build you back up as a better artist. And I think that's bullshit. I think it's absolutely horrible because there is always a polite, respectful, and constructive way to give criticism. Because if someone's work is truly bad, like truly just like unhireable, like we're thinking the worst case example, they are not hireable with their skill level, then you don't have to say you are bad and unhireable. You can say, I'm going to be honest, I think the thing I would focus on the most is the actual quality of the work. I think that you should have a look at other people's portfolios and benchmark yourself about them and just try to be realistic about if you think that the quality level of your work is up to par with yada yada yada, whatever. You shouldn't need to be harsh. And people who be like, oh, well, I'll be blunt, but, I'm doing it for the good of you. It's just not worth it. That's a toxic environment, and you shouldn't have to do that to be able to get something that supports you and builds you up. Like, even if someone's work is a little bit crap, it doesn't matter. Like, good job. Find something that's positive about it. Eventually, over time, their artistic eye will develop enough that they can look back on their own work and realize it was crap or not good enough. Like, leave them to that themselves. You shouldn't have to hurt people to be able to make them better. It's not how it works. Anyway, I'm going to go on a rant on that. So, like I said, finding an environment that supports you. You've got to gas each other up, especially in an instance where you're trying to do this by yourself. Motivation is really hard. But if you can find, fun little challenges, be like, hey, everyone, let's do like a speed sculpt, get ZBrush out and sculpt something together. That could be fun. That's something that's like gamifies it and makes it feel like you're doing it as part of a challenge for each other, and finding ways to make it enjoyable and actually satisfying, and having friends and meeting up and going to EGX together so it doesn't feel as scary and it's less daunting. And there's always a way that you can facilitate something. And I know it can be difficult when you're like going into a Discord with complete strangers, but so many people are really nice that they will be just as nice to you in return. And if they're not, then you don't want to be their friend or their network anyway. And just finally on that point as well, who is giving you the advice? Like I said about good advice and good feedback, but sometimes people will give you advice, which is great, but they're not necessarily qualified to talk on that subject. Like if you, I don't know, made a game jam, and showed it to your mum, unless your mum is also a game developer, in which case, sick, nepo baby. Unless she's a game developer that is like skilled in that, her feedback is not necessarily going to be as important as someone who is. So not all, that's just one example, but not all feedback you have to listen to. People can tell you things that are like, oh no, this is true, but what you're actually saying is just a subjective fact, subjective like opinion. I'm just saying, oh, I think it should be this. And you go, okay, but do you think it for a good reason, or is it just because you like that thing more? So just think about the authority that someone has on what they're telling you and whether or not you think it's actually worth listening to. You can just say thank you for the feedback. That's it. Thank you for the feedback. You don't have to say I will do it or I will not do it. Just thank you for the feedback. That's it. Um, and yeah, when using all of these ideas of trying to find a good community, these are just some examples of ones which the very, very nice people on my Twitter helped collate all of these into one that I've made together, which are just examples of communities which support different things. So, for example, we've got Anim State, which is an animation Discord. These are all just their Twitter handles, I believe. Some of them, these are all hyperlinked. So once I send this actual Google Slides out, you can click on all of the individual ones and it'll take you to their Twitter or their Discord or something like that. But these are just examples of communities that already exist to support certain things like programming or specifically hand-painted art or VFX for games or UI for games or more general ones like Reddit or something like that. But there are loads of ones that already exist which you can always just try. And you can try one and go, not for me. This one is not it. Do not like the vibes. I'm out of here. But there's so much value in trying all of those different ones and just looking at what exists. And who knows, maybe over time you can go, hey, actually, does anyone want to start a new Discord with me, which is for this very specific niche thing? Like, I don't know. I want to start one which is specifically just for making 3D models for COD, COD style ones. That's all we want to do. And that's the community you can develop. And some will probably be interested in that. Or, you can develop your own ones. But there are just many, many, many examples of existing ones that you can have a look at and get involved with. And I think it's a really good place to start pushing yourself in the right direction and using these communities as a resource. Like they're not just there to just chat about shit. You can, but you can be like, hey, does anyone have a good recommendation for a tutorial to do XYZ? And people who are learning around you will go, hey, yeah, I've literally just done one. This is a really good tutorial. Or don't buy this course. I think it's overrated. The tutorial isn't very good. That kind of thing. So you can help support each other. And who knows, maybe one of you gets hired and then at work they go, hey, does anybody know a 3D artist? And you go, yeah, I do actually. There's one in my Discord. They're really friendly. They've got really great work. I see them posting all the time. I'll get them to apply. And like I said earlier about them, these people may become your colleagues and your referrals into work. That's how it can work. That's the way that a network should be, in a way which doesn't feel just about like getting something out of people. It's no, you're putting in the work to build relationships with people at its core, and hopefully and eventually and maybe and luckily those things can pay off and result in something that's concrete like a job or opportunity. So final notes on all of these things. Like I mentioned, everything in here is free, bar the upfront hardware cost of everything, and also the cost of just physically staying alive. But that's always going to depend on your individual circumstances. Everything in here is free. The only thing that you need to really do is find the way to use those free resources to support the plan that you have. So obviously step one is you need a plan. You need something specific. Decide what you're working towards first and go from there. And you can change your plan. Like you can change your mind. You don't ever have to stick at anything. You can be a 3D artist and then you get 3 months in and you go, actually, you know what? I hate 3D art. I don't want to do this as a job. Let me try something else. Let me try concept art or character art or VFX. There are always jobs in VFX. But as long as you have something to start with, you can start to focus on that things and build those skills. And even if your plan does change, the time that you've spent learning and developing is not wasted because you've learned other things along the way. Even how to teach yourself and how to grow and how to develop. Those are skills in themselves, even if the content changes. So pick a path and be specific. And you can be crazy specific too if you want to. Like, I want to become a junior 3D artist at Rocksteady. Like, that's specific. You can say, well, no, I love Rocksteady games. I love the art style. I enjoy making art in the art style. So that's what I want my job to be. And, that might change or that you might not achieve that. But having something specific helps guide your learning because then all of your learning is going to be about how to develop your skills, which pushes you in a direction that you really want to be working in. Like, there's no point spending your time doing, like, hyper realistic sculpts of faces if all you want to do is like low poly rocks for an indie game. You know what I mean? It's all about focusing something in the direction that you actually want to be in. And then once you have that, get all your hardware and your software. If you can get a free version of anything, always do. If your PC's struggling with the current version, roll back to an older version. You can usually find them on their websites, and going all the way back to like, I don't know, 2015, 2016 versions of stuff, which are going to run much better on your PC. And then once you have that, start gathering all your resources. Find tutorials, find tutorials on very specifically how to make things, and then also more about theory-based things, how to approach things in an artistic way, or how to develop your RI, or if it's engineering resources that are about both programming and then also about the logic of programming, and then also about development as a whole and learning about how it all fits together. Like not just any of one thing. Gather loads of resources and then work through them at a pace which you can maintain. And like talking about pace, a structure. You have to make some kind of structure from the get-go, and then you can develop it and you can change it. I originally started out doing tutorials first thing in the morning, and then I realized that my brain didn't really turn on until like 11 a.m. anyway. So that's why I then decided to start doing my job searching in the morning, because it was kind of just more like clicking. It was just clicking thing like no job, click no job, no job, and it was very monotonous, and my brain could be switched off for it. So that by the time I'd kind of woken up, now I'm like ready to go. I've done all my crappy admin out of the way for the day. Now it's time to do some fun creative learning stuff. So you can develop it and you can change it over time, but something that's structured. There's a theory that if you can do something for 21 days, it becomes part of your routine. So all you got to do is keep it up for 3 weeks, and then after that point, you never need to think about it. You'll just do it. I mean, that's the hope anyway. And then once you have that, start building your socials. And when I say building your socials, I don't think you do not have to become any kind of social media influencer or content creator. You literally just have to have an account. And that could be it. But it's somewhere where you can go and at least find the resources. And it could just be a simple thing as starting by following people who you like their art. You find a bunch of 3D artists, follow them all, and eventually you start commenting and you're like, hey, I like your art. And then eventually they see you, click on your profile, because human nature is curiosity, and you click on your profile, see that you're a 3D artist as well, see that you've posted a couple of pieces of work, and then maybe they follow you back, and then maybe they go, hey, I see that you're a junior, or you're learning, do you want to join this Discord that we're in? And that's how it works. Like, it doesn't have to be something that's like this weird parasocial relationship where you just follow a bunch of people and you're just like harassing them and being like, look at my art, give me a portfolio review. And it also doesn't need to be this thing where you become an influencer. Like, you just being online is a boon if you can use it to get access to resources and people and meet people. And like I said, build a relationship with those people. Like, it's not just trying to take something from them. And with those people, they can make recommendations for events or suggest events to go to that they think have been good. Maybe they say, actually, you know what? I've been to GDC. I don't think it's worth it. Or I went to GDC and it was the best time of my life. If you can go, definitely go. Those kinds of things. And people can give you recommendations for those things. Maybe events that you've never even heard of. And for communities, they can do the same thing. You're a part of a community, and then you can similarly start to then give advice to other people once you start to learn a bit more about your discipline, about the industry, or maybe you just saw a cool tutorial, did the tutorial, and then were like, whoa, this is sick. Share it with the Discord and say, I just did this tutorial. It's the best tutorial I've ever done. I think everybody should do it. And then you're an actively engaging member of the game dev community immediately, because you are and you're helping. And there's a lot of value in that. And finally, but probably most importantly, like I said, I did not take well enough care of this at the time because I unfortunately didn't really have much of an option. But taking care of your health, looking out for the signs of burnout, fatigue, loneliness, structure can be really a good way to do this, because then you can forcibly inject health into your routine. If you know, nope, every day, 1 o'clock, tools down, I go out, go for a walk, get myself a little ice cream from the shop. I don't know, whatever you want to do. Something that makes you see the sun and get some vitamin D, or go for a run or get some health, and make sure you speak to people, and that you're taking care of yourself and doing something. And like I said, I treated it like a full-time job, so I didn't ever experience any kind of element of like crunch to me. Like I finished work at 6 o'clock. I was not working through the night. I had like really specific sleep routine, so I was waking up at the same time every day, going to sleep every time, and it was very very like regimented as much as I could do. And I feel like that really worked for myself. But trying to look out for those signs and just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because you don't want to start and get into the routine of having unhealthy habits and then getting a job, and then by the time you're working you're already doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing, and you should be taking breaks and taking care of yourself. And that is pretty much it. um I know there are loads of caveats in general to everything. I know, for example, lots of people might have the opportunity to live with their parents, in which case if you can and you can stand them, do it. If it's free rent, do it. I don't know, like there are lots of things, like I don't want to give anyone individual life advice, but if you can make use or take advantage of things like that allow you to have a time where you can focus and learn and really really dedicate yourself, absolutely take advantage of those things. And if you don't have access to even something like £400 to buy a PC, which I totally understand a lot of people wouldn't, maybe think about making this like a slightly longer term plan, and planning for getting your job in the meantime, really, really, really saving for that initial investment and then doing something about it. Rather than trying to do everything at once and going, oh, but my PC's so shit and I can't even run the program. And I'm like, okay, cool. First plan is I've got to solve the first problem, which is I don't even have the hardware. Let's just solve that first. Everyone's situation is going to be different, and the things that they can manage and maintain is different. But joining a community is another way that you can kind of get support on those things. Maybe you could join a community and someone is selling their old PC for like 200 quid and they're just selling it for cheap in the Discord because they don't even use it. Something like that. There are loads of ways that you can access this information. And that's why I mentioned about using socials, is that you're not doing this to become an influencer. Is doing it so that you have access to more people, and more people is just more advice. And like I said at the beginning, everything I've said today is just my opinion about things, and my opinion might change over time. It's just how I feel right now about these things, but it's just my opinion. But if you got 100 people's opinions and then you go, well, you know what, I disagreed with 97 of them, but those sounded sick, that's what I'm going to do. That's how you can find a route that's going to work for yourself. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about anything I've said in here, always feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. My socials are right there under my face. Make sure to hit the bell notification, and I post every Tuesday. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. It is rough. It's difficult, but it can be done. I mean, for me, like I grew up in an incredibly low income background, and I was used to skimping and saving and scraping to get by, and I didn't have any other choice but to just make it work. And it's what worked for me. But trying something out for yourself, and then over time you'll develop what works for you. And I hope it's successful. My final plug is always going to be that if you are unsure of what you want to do, become a VFX artist. Because there are so many jobs. There's a stupid ratio. It's something like for every one VFX artist, there's like 400 jobs. It's like the least saturated role in game dev. Which is literally the reason why I chose it. Like, loads of people have their origin story of like, I just fell in love with VFX. And don't get me wrong, it looks sick. I thought it was really cool. But my main focus was, I was like, that's going to pay me a wage. And I really enjoy it. It's really fun. If you're not sure, give it a go. I have another presentation which is called Breaking into Games as a Self-Taught VFX Artist, which is exactly how I actually, all of the resources I used and the way that I did it, and just kind of brief introduction to what VFX is. I'll post that one as well, and hopefully it's helpful for someone. If not, feel free to reach out and message me. I might be able to direct you in the way of someone which can give you a better answer about something I don't know. And thank you very much. Au revoir.